This may appear to be a tale of wealth and deception, but it is truly a harsh realization of one's inner value. When society tries to measure your worth by your bank account, remember that real strength does not come from the riches others see. It comes from the dignity and clarity you maintain regardless of your circumstances. While I was handing out flyers on State Street in Madison, I spotted my girlfriend, Sarah Jenkins, from a distance. She was disheveled and draped over the interior of a luxury sports car, locked in a heated makeout session with the campus golden boy, Tyler Miller. I walked up and rapped on the window, causing Tyler to frown and ask her who I was. Sarah just leaned back in his chest and said dismissively that I was just some pathetic simp. She told him that if he didn't like me being there, she would dump me right on the spot. She went back to kissing him as if I didn't exist, and then she walked away without even glancing in my direction. Tyler licked his lips with a smug grin and started mocking me. He told me to get lost because beautiful women only belong to winners like him. I suppressed my rage and asked him how he had the nerve to be sitting in my car. The atmosphere turned awkward and silent as Tyler gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. He stared at me in total confusion and asked if I had just claimed the car was mine. I told him that the car was absolutely mine as I reached into the glove box to pull out the registration. I flashed the document in front of his face so he could see my name, Morrison Vance, clearly printed on it. I asked him if he was trying to steal my vehicle and threatened to call the police immediately. Tyler's face turned bright red as he scrambled out of the driver's seat. He begged me not to call the cops and confessed that his father was the mechanic at the local shop. He said he thought the car looked cool and decided to take it for a joyride, pleading with me to keep the authorities out of it. I rolled my eyes and raised my voice so people nearby could hear, asking him if he really thought stealing a car counted as borrowing. I asked him if his shop's idea of maintenance was taking client vehicles out for personal use. He hung his head and apologized, but I told him to save it while I checked the car for any damage. He stayed silent while I inspected the bodywork and quickly found a prominent dent on the hood. When I demanded an explanation, he panicked and shifted the blame onto Sarah. He claimed it wasn't his fault because she had insisted on sitting on the front of the car to take selfies for her social media. Tyler told me she had posted a bunch of provocative photos on Facebook as proof of what happened. I checked my own phone but saw nothing, so he handed me his. It turned out that Sarah had already blocked me on everything to hide her tracks. I scrolled through her Facebook feed and shook my head at the suggestive photos she had posted. I told Tyler to go home for now and warned him that I was saving the images as evidence for a future lawsuit. He looked terrified and asked how much the repairs would cost, to which I casually replied that it would be around $100,000. His face went pale as a sheet, and he protested that she was the one who actually caused the damage. I asked him if he lacked basic legal knowledge, explaining that they were both liable for the incident. I told him his father was going to have to work the entire year for free just to cover his mistake. The usually arrogant Tyler Miller started crying right there on the sidewalk, sobbing while he cursed Sarah. He complained that he had told that stupid woman the hood was carbon fiber and that the material was sensitive to temperature. He had apparently warned her to wait for the car to warm up before sitting on it, but she wouldn't listen. He lamented that she was so desperate for her photos that she hopped onto the hood the moment he started the engine. Now he was the one suffering the consequences of her vanity. He cried about how his parents worked so hard only for their savings to be wiped out by her actions. His constant blubbering was getting on my nerves, so I climbed into my car and called an appraiser for a quote. As I started the engine, Tyler wiped his eyes and yelled at me, demanding to know why I was so wealthy. He said Sarah had told him I was a broke loser who had to work multiple menial jobs just to survive. I calmly informed him that I wasn't an employee for anyone. While it was true I was handing out flyers, those businesses actually belonged to my family. I was telling the truth because my family owns 72 storefronts along that entire commercial strip in Madison. There was absolutely nothing wrong with me helping out the family business. I rolled up the window to drown out his sobbing and drove away. Just then, a notification popped up from Sarah on my message. She told me that since I had caught her, we might as well end things. She told me not to blame her, but to blame my parents for being so unsuccessful and poor. She wrote that she would rather cry in a Lamborghini than spend her life smiling on the back of my rusty bicycle while we passed out flyers together. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a bit amused. Whether it was the Lamborghini or the bike, they both belonged to me, so I wondered if she was supposed to be laughing or crying. I was about to reply and tell her to expect a court summons, but I realized she had already blocked my number. It was pretty bold of her to cut me off while she still owed me a fortune for the damages to my car. I decided I wasn't going to let her get away with it that easily. I didn't care that I was entering the girls' dormitory at the university as I stormed up to her floor. Since it was early in the morning, the hallways were mostly empty and no one tried to stop me. Just as I was about to knock on her door, I heard a female voice from inside asking if Sarah had followed through with the plan. Sarah replied that she had lied to Tyler and told him she was on birth control. The other woman sounded thrilled, saying it was a perfect opportunity because Sarah was currently in her fertile window. She told Sarah that if she got pregnant, she could secure her place in a wealthy family forever. Sarah sounded a bit nervous and asked what would happen if he pressured her to get an abortion. The other woman spoke calmly, assuring her that once she was pregnant, there were plenty of ways to force him to take responsibility. She reminded Sarah that she had already dumped her previous boyfriend for Tyler, so they would make sure he didn't walk away. I stood in the hallway, completely floored by what I was hearing. I never imagined Sarah would sink low enough to use a child as a bargaining chip to trap someone she thought was rich. I found myself wondering exactly what kind of expression she would make once she opened the door and saw me standing there. I couldn't wait to see her reaction when she realized her rich Prince Charming was actually a thief who had stolen my car. I hammered on the door and Sarah pulled it open, her face immediately contorting into a scowl. She coldly asked why I was still bothering her since she had already ended our relationship. She told me that being poor wasn't a crime, but being a broke loser who wouldn't stop harassing women was truly pathetic. It was obvious she thought I was there to beg for another chance. I noticed her two roommates, Chloe Dawson and Lily Porter, were also in the room watching the scene unfold. Before I could even get a word out, Chloe spoke up with an annoyed tone, telling me to stop standing in the way of Sarah's happiness. I was honestly stunned by that logic. Apparently, in their circle, cheating on your boyfriend with some guy in a stolen sports car qualified as a noble pursuit of happiness. I recognized Chloe Dawson as Sarah's closest friend and the one who had just suggested the pregnancy trap. Ever since I started dating Sarah, Chloe had always been snide and passive-aggressive toward me. She was exactly the kind of toxic influence that encouraged this behavior. She was always saying that a man's love was measured by how much cash he dropped on a woman. Because of her constant nagging and prodding, I had ended up buying Sarah a lot of expensive designer items. My goal for being there was to reclaim every single gift I had paid for. I told her that the breakup was perfectly fine with me, but I demanded she return the iPhone I had bought for her. I purposefully didn't mention that the Lamborghini belonged to me. Knowing Sarah's manipulative nature, if she found out about the car, she would probably try to find a way to stay with me just for the money. I needed to get my belongings back before revealing the truth. Sarah's brow furrowed as she asked me how I could be so incredibly stingy and selfish. I was at a total loss for words because she was the one who cheated, yet she expected me to be the one considering her feelings. Chloe suddenly burst out laughing and told Sarah that it was obvious I was just playing games. She claimed that asking for my stuff back was just a desperate excuse to see her because I couldn't handle being dumped. She told Sarah that I was just trying to make her life difficult to keep her from leaving. Sarah gave a cold laugh and said she finally understood my pathetic plan. She asked if I really thought she would stay with me just because she didn't want to give back some gifts. She reminded me that her new boyfriend was incredibly wealthy and wouldn't care about such trifles. Sarah tilted her head back with a smug expression while Chloe chimed in to fuel her ego. Chloe mentioned that she had looked up the price of that Lamborghini and confirmed it was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. She told Sarah that a new phone would be pocket change for a guy with that kind of money. Sarah laughed and agreed to return the phone, but only after she made one final phone call. She said she wanted to show me exactly why she was dumping me and prove that the gap between me and a truly wealthy man was a chasm I could never bridge. I felt a surge of amusement as I realized she was talking about Tyler Miller. It was hilarious because just a few days ago, when I dropped my car off at his father's shop, the old man was complaining about how hard it was to make ends meet. He had literally told me they were struggling to even pay the rent for the garage. Sarah dialed the number, and Chloe insisted she put on speakerphone so I could hear exactly how much of a loser I was. Sarah nodded, looking absolutely desperate to show off her new catch, and tapped the speaker icon as the call began to ring. As soon as the call was picked up, she put on a fake, whiny voice and told Tyler that her boyfriend was being mean. She complained that I was demanding the phone back after the breakup and worried about how she would stay in touch with him without it. Tyler Miller didn't play along with her damsel in distress routine at all. Instead, he started screaming through the phone, calling her a worthless bitch and telling her to never show her face near him again. He even threatened to beat her if he ever caught sight of her on campus. The call ended with a sharp click before Sarah could even respond. Both she and Chloe stood there frozen, staring at the silent phone in total disbelief. Once the shock wore off, Chloe snapped and grabbed a textbook from the bed, hurling it at my head while she screamed at me. She accused me of talking trash about Sarah downstairs to ruin things with Tyler. Sarah started shaking with rage, convinced that he would never have spoken to her that way unless I had been whispering poison in his ear. She called me a disgusting, underhanded coward for sabotaging her new relationship. I was getting tired of their drama and told them to stop the nonsense and just give me the phone. My voice was cold and flat, but Sarah kept pushing, demanding to know why he had suddenly turned on her if I hadn't said anything. I was honestly beyond words at her stupidity. She was the one who had posted those ridiculous selfies while sitting on the hood of a car she didn't own. She had caused thousands of dollars in damage that his family was now legally responsible for, so of course they were furious with her. Chloe gave a nasty sneer and told Sarah she was right to encourage her to leave me for Tyler. She claimed she had always known I was a broke loser who could only win by playing petty games behind people's backs. She looked at me with pure disgust and called me a pathetic simp once again. I stared at Chloe and asked if she was admitting to helping Sarah cheat on me the entire time. Chloe immediately fired back that it wasn't betrayal, but rather a rescue mission. She claimed she was just trying to pull her best friend out of the mud of a relationship with a guy like me. Chloe said she couldn't stand by and watch Sarah ruin her life by staying with a guy who had no future. Sarah finally snapped and told me I could have a phone on one condition. She demanded that I go downstairs and apologize to Tyler Miller for framing her and lying about her character. Chloe started shouting in the background that I should even get on my knees to beg for forgiveness and clear Sarah's name. I ignored her and shoved the phone into my pocket, telling them I wasn't going to apologize for something I didn't do. I reminded Sarah that we still had a lot of financial matters to settle before I was finished with her. I walked into their room and pulled up a chair at the desk, opening my banking app. I started tallying up every single gift, dinner, and Venmo transfer I had sent Sarah during our relationship. I had no intention of leaving without every cent being accounted for. Sarah looked at me with a performative sense of disappointment, asking if I really wanted to humiliate her in front of her friends. She tried to play the love card, but I didn't even look up at her. I just kept tapping away on my screen, adding up the totals of her greed. Chloe suddenly raised her phone and snapped a photo of me while I was focused on the numbers. She called me the ultimate broke loser and promised to post the picture on Facebook immediately. She wanted everyone at the University of Wisconsin to see what a petty, broke person I was, so I would be socially exiled. I assumed she was just bluffing, but when I checked my feed, I saw she had actually posted it. The caption warned other girls to never date poor guys because they only cause trouble. She claimed her best friend was being haunted by a broke ex, calling the whole situation terrifying. I looked up and told her that what was happening between Sarah and me was a private matter that had nothing to do with her. I asked her if she ever got tired of using the word poor as an insult. I suggested she just go ahead and tattoo the words gold digger on her forehead since she was so obsessed with money. Chloe just scoffed and admitted that she loved rich men, asking what I was going to do about it. She told me that if I were actually wealthy, I would be the one in power, but since I wasn't, I had no right to talk. She told me to look in a mirror and realize how pathetic I appeared to everyone. She got more animated as she spoke, walking over to the window and pointing toward the parking lot. She said that a real man would be out driving a six-figure Lamborghini and focusing on his career. According to her, only a broke loser would sit in a dorm room and nickel and dime a girl over old gifts. She claimed that guys like me made women feel physically sick with regret. Finally, the other roommate, Lily Porter, couldn't stay silent anymore. She told Sarah that she should probably just pay me back because, at the end of the day, she was the one who had messed up. Sarah's expression hardened, and she asked Lily if she was seriously taking my side. Chloe stepped in with a nasty laugh, claiming that Lily was just green with envy. She told Sarah that Lily was only acting this way because she couldn't handle the fact that Sarah was dating a guy with a supercar. Chloe accused Lily of trying to tear Sarah down just to make herself feel better. Lily's face flushed with anger as she told Chloe to stop telling lies about her. I knew Lily was a hard-working student from a humble background who stayed out of trouble. I remembered one time when Sarah wanted to show off by having me buy expensive desserts for the whole floor, but Lily was the only one who refused to take any. She had told us that since she hadn't contributed, she didn't feel right taking things for free. That moment of integrity really stuck with me. Sarah let out a patronizing sigh and told Lily that she understood her struggle. She said she knew Lily was only there on financial aid and scholarships, so it was natural for her to feel bitter toward wealthy people. She told Lily that she didn't hold her jealousy against her. Sarah actually had the audacity to tell Lily that her character was more important than her GPA. Lily's eyes went wide with disbelief as she asked Sarah if she was seriously questioning her morality. I sat there in complete shock at the sheer hypocrisy of the situation. Lily was one of the most dedicated and honest students on campus. Meanwhile, Sarah had just been caught cheating in a stolen car, and now she was lectured Lily about how to behave properly. I wondered if she actually believed the nonsense coming out of her own mouth. Chloe joined in on the bullying, saying she could see right through Lily's act. She accused Lily of being a fake who was only acting virtuous to get my attention now that I was single. She sneered and asked if Lily was trying to move in on her best friends. Chloe told Lily that with her looks and background, she couldn't even attract a guy with a motorcycle, let alone a Lamborghini. I couldn't stand the bullying any longer, so I spoke up. I asked Chloe if she really thought so little of a guy who worked hard to earn a few $1,000s a month. Lily stood up, her fists clenched, and defended herself by saying she worked as a tutor to earn her own money. Chloe just looked her up and down with total disgust. She mocked Lily for being satisfied with such small amounts of money, calling it pathetic. Chloe claimed she saw Lily picking food off the table to eat the day before and used it as proof of her poverty. She told Lily that desperate people like her obviously didn't have high standards for the men they dated. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she argued that eating food off a clean table didn't make her a peasant. Sarah screamed at us to shut up and slammed her phone down on the desk with a loud crack. She looked at me with pure hatred and told me that I was a total embarrassment to her. She claimed that dating me was the single biggest mistake she had ever made in her life. Sarah told me to finish my calculations quickly so she could go and explain everything to Tyler. Chloe patted her on the shoulder and promised to go with her to smooth things over. She told Sarah they would kill the rumors and she would be back to being Tyler's pampered girlfriend in no time. I ignored their little performance and went back to my numbers. I purposely left the $100,000 repair bill out of the total for now. I was genuinely afraid that if I told her the car was mine, she would immediately try to manipulate her way back into my life. I finally finished totaling up the expenses from the last 12 months. Between the designer handbags and the direct transfers, it came out to exactly $18,000. Even I was a little surprised by how much I had actually spent on her. I never realized that dating could be such a drain on my finances. My personal monthly expenses were usually very low, but looking at the math, I realized I had been dumping a small fortune into her lifestyle. It was a wake-up call for me as much as it was for her. Sarah and Chloe both looked stunned when they saw the final number. Since we were all university students, having $18,000 in cash wasn't exactly common. They tried to find errors in my math several times, but eventually they had to admit the total was correct. Sarah's face filled with anxiety as she admitted she didn't have $18,000 just sitting in her bank account. Chloe jumped in and told her not to worry, promising to help her find a way to get the money together. She was determined to help Sarah sever ties with me for good. Chloe whispered to her that her current handling of me would determine Tyler's future opinion of her. She argued that even if they had to take out a high-interest loan, they had to settle the debt immediately. She insisted that Sarah had to burn her bridge with me if she wanted any chance of becoming Tyler's wife. After a bit more convincing from Chloe, Sarah finally agreed to find the money through private loans. She made Chloe promise not to let her parents find out, fearing they would be furious if they knew she was in this much debt. I just sat there, listening to them dig a deeper hole. It was funny to see her panic over $18,000 when a $100,000 repair bill was already heading toward her permanent address. Once that arrived, her parents wouldn't just be angry, they would likely want to disown her entirely. Sarah and Chloe started making frantic calls to everyone they knew to ask for money. To my surprise, people were actually willing to help them out. By collecting a few $100s from various classmates, they actually managed to pull together a significant portion of the total. Sarah was shocked at how easily people were handing over their cash. Chloe gave a sly grin and told her it was all thanks to the lifestyle she portrayed on Facebook. People assumed she was dating a billionaire, so they thought she was a safe bet for a loan. Chloe explained that because Sarah posted photos in luxury cars, everyone assumed she had wealthy connections. Classmates were happy to lend her money in hopes of getting into her elite social circle. Sarah looked over at me with a triumphant smirk, clearly proud of her newfound status. She told me to look at the influence a truly wealthy man had on a woman's life. She bragged that because of Tyler, people were lining up to give her money just to stay in her good graces. She felt like she had finally ascended to a higher social class. Sarah asked me who would ever help her if she were still tied to a loser like me. Chloe added a snarky comment, saying that being in a relationship with me was already the biggest disaster a person could experience. They laughed together as they continued to scramble for the remaining cash. They kept insulting me while they rounded up more funds, but even after hitting up everyone they knew, they were still $10,000 short. Chloe bit her lip and mentioned she knew a guy off campus who could provide the rest of the money immediately. She warned that the consequences of missing a payment to this guy would be severe, which made Sarah visibly nervous. Chloe just brushed it off and told her not to worry about the details. She argued that Tyler would easily cover $10,000 once they were officially together. She made a quick call to this shady contact who was clearly a professional loan shark. The guy didn't even hesitate and transferred the $10,000 to them instantly. It was terrifying how quickly they were willing to sign away their futures for a quick fix. Once they had the full amount, they handed me the $18,000 in cash and transfers. Sarah threw the iPhone at my chest and told me to take my garbage and get out of her life. She declared that from this moment on, we were officially nothing to each other. I nodded and then turned my attention to Lily, asking if she could step into the hallway with me for a moment. Lily looked confused and hesitant, unsure of what I wanted. Chloe immediately started cackling, claiming she knew all along that there was something going on between us. Chloe mocked us for hooking up the second the debt was settled, but I just felt a deep sense of pity for her. My only reason for talking to Lily was her position in the student union, which gave her access to the university's housing directory. I needed Sarah's permanent home address to serve her the legal papers. Since I was moving forward with a formal lawsuit for the car damages, I needed her family's verified address in Illinois. Lily's face turned bright red as she sheepishly followed me out of the room. She was clearly embarrassed by her roommate's loud accusations. Chloe shouted after us, telling Lily that she was pathetic for taking Sarah's leftovers. Lily looked like she was about to cry and insisted she didn't have any romantic interest in me. It was hard to watch such a kind person get bullied by people like Chloe. Chloe's insults got even nastier as she called Lily a fake and a hypocrite. She said it was no surprise Lily's family was poor, because stupidity must be genetic in her bloodline. She mocked her for trying to impress a guy who handed out flyers, saying it was the only level her family could hope for. Sarah stood there with her arms crossed, looking at us with utter disdain. She said she was glad to be rid of a loser like me, and that Lily was more than welcome to have my scraps. She ended with a cruel remark about how a bitch and a dog belong together forever. We walked down the hallway, and Lily quietly told me that she had only spoken up because she was angry at the injustice. She begged me not to misunderstand her intentions and insisted she was only focused on her studies. She didn't want anyone to think she was actually chasing after me. I told her I understood and that dating would definitely be a distraction from her tutoring and scholarship goals. She looked relieved, but then asked me why I had actually asked her to step outside. She was genuinely curious about what I needed from her. I asked her if she could use her access to the student directory to find Sarah's home address for me. She immediately grew concerned and asked if I was planning to do something dangerous. She pleaded with me not to let my anger lead to a mistake that would ruin my life. She was so worried that she instinctively grabbed my hand to get my attention. She told me that while people like us might not have money, we still had our pride and our integrity. She begged me not to throw away my future just to get revenge on someone like Sarah. A sudden silence fell between us as I realized she thought I was some kind of unhinged person planning something violent. When she realized she was still holding my hand, she pulled away instantly as if she had been burned. Her face turned a deep shade of crimson as she looked down at her feet. She told me that someone as hardworking as I was deserved a good life and that Sarah would eventually regret her choices within a decade. I looked at her and quietly told her that it wouldn't take 10 years for the regret to set in. I knew the fallout was going to happen much sooner than that. I explained that the dealership had already sent an appraiser to look at the damage and that the consequences were imminent. Lily looked at me with a blank stare, so I decided to drop the bombshell. I told her that the luxury sports car everyone was talking about actually belonged to me. Her entire body went stiff, and she looked at me like I was playing a prank on her. I took a few minutes to explain the whole situation, from the stolen car to Tyler's father being my mechanic. She was completely floored by the revelation and struggled to process the information. It wasn't until I showed her the physical registration for the car that she finally started to believe me. When she went to get the directory, she walked with a glazed expression, looking like someone who was wandering through a dream. She couldn't wrap her head around the fact that the flyer guy was actually wealthy. A few minutes later, she messaged me Sarah's home address in the Chicago suburbs. I was surprised to see that her family home was only a few miles away from the authorized dealership. It was a bizarre coincidence that made serving her much easier than I expected. I made a quick call to the dealership, and they confirmed the final damage report would be ready in 10 minutes. Then I realized a practical problem. Sarah had just returned the phone I bought for her. I needed a way to keep tabs on her and ensure she received the information. If I was going to collect $100,000 from her, I needed to keep the lines of communication open. I decided the best move was to let her keep the phone for a few more days so she couldn't hide. I turned around and headed back toward her dormitory room. When she saw me standing at her door again, her face twisted in annoyance, and she asked why I was back. I told her I realized she wouldn't have a way to communicate without a phone, so I was going to let her keep it for another 48 hours. Chloe immediately made a gagging sound and claimed she knew this would happen. She told Sarah that I was just using the phone as an excuse to keep hanging around like a pathetic stalker. She was convinced I was playing a desperate game to win Sarah back. Sarah also lost her temper and asked if I took her for an idiot, screaming at me to stop harassing her. She yelled that I had already humiliated her enough in front of her roommates. Right in the middle of her rant, Chloe's phone started buzzing with an incoming call. Chloe looked at the screen with a confused expression and asked why Sarah's parents were calling her instead of Sarah. I knew exactly what was happening. The dealership had tried to reach Sarah, and when they couldn't, they started calling her emergency contacts or known associates to deliver the news. Sarah took the phone and answered, only to be met with her mother's screaming voice. Even without the speakerphone on, we could all hear her mom yelling at her to never call her mom again. She was shouting about how Sarah's actions were going to bankrupt the entire family. The sudden verbal assault left Sarah standing there in a daze, barely able to ask what she had done wrong. She retreated to the corner of the room to continue the conversation in private, but as she listened, her composure completely shattered. Within seconds, she was sobbing uncontrollably into the phone. Chloe rushed over to comfort her and asked what the problem was. Sarah could barely speak through her tears as she explained that she finally knew why Tyler Miller was so angry with her. She confessed that her impromptu photo shoot on the car's hood had caused a major structural dent. She cried that Tyler's family was demanding $137,000 for the repairs. Chloe was absolutely stunned, unable to believe that a simple selfie could result in a six-figure repair bill. She kept asking how sitting on a car for a few minutes could possibly cost that much money. Sarah explained that the official estimate had already been mailed to her parents' house, and her mother had sent a photo of it to her phone. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing in total shock. The reality of the situation was finally starting to set in. Chloe bit her lip and told Sarah to stay calm, because there might still be a way out of the mess. Sarah looked up with a glimmer of hope and asked what she had in mind. Chloe leaned in and whispered that the most important thing right now was to confirm if Sarah was actually pregnant. Chloe argued that if Sarah were carrying Tyler's child, his family would never dare to sue her for the repair costs. Sarah's eyes brightened at the idea, and she nodded frantically. She convinced herself that even if Tyler didn't love her, he would be forced to protect the mother of his future heir. Chloe got more worked up, suggesting they could cause a massive scene at Tyler's house if he tried to pursue the debt while Sarah was pregnant. Sarah let out a heavy sigh, admitting that she had originally planned for the baby to be her ticket into a life of luxury. Now, it was just a tool to avoid financial ruin. Sarah lamented that her grand plan for wealth had been reduced to a simple debt settlement. Chloe tried to cheer her up by reminding her that saving $100,000 was like earning several years' worth of her parents' salary. She insisted that there was still a chance the pregnancy could lead to a permanent place in Tyler's family. Chloe speculated that if Tyler's parents found out about a grandchild, they might force him to marry Sarah and give her a new car as a wedding gift. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should be a bigger person and offer a warning. I knew their logic was fundamentally flawed and would lead to more pain. I knew that being pregnant wouldn't legally absolve her from the damages she had caused to my property. I opened my mouth to say something, but Sarah immediately snapped her head toward me with a look of pure hatred. She didn't want to hear a single word from me. She marched over and snatched the phone back from my hand, telling me to shut my mouth and leave. She said she was in a terrible mood and didn't have the patience to deal with me anymore. Chloe chimed in as well, screaming at me to get out of their sight. They were too busy plotting how to manipulate Tyler Miller to listen to reason. I tried to show them the repair estimate I had received, but Chloe cut me off with another insult. She told me to take my broke energy somewhere else because they had no interest in anything I had to say. She threatened to call the campus security and report me for harassment if I didn't leave immediately. I decided to take her advice and just walk away. After all, her prediction about seeing each other in court was definitely going to come true very soon. As I was leaving, I heard Sarah recording a voice message for Tyler. She sounded pathetic as she begged him to meet her downstairs so they could talk things through. She was clearly putting all her eggs in the pregnancy basket. Tyler's response came back almost immediately, and she played it on speaker. His voice sounded cold and bored as he agreed to the meeting. He called her a bitch again and told her to get down there right away because he also had things he wanted to discuss. Sarah looked worried as she put the phone down, asking Chloe if she thought Tyler would actually forgive her after hearing that tone. Chloe just patted her hand and reassured her, saying they would go down together so Sarah could apologize. She was convinced they could still flip the situation. Chloe helped Sarah off the bed and gave me a final glare, telling me to get out of the way. I didn't say a word and just turned toward the exit. As I reached the stairs, I ran into Lily, who was just returning from the student union office. Sarah and Chloe brushed past us in a hurry, heading for the elevator without looking back. Lily looked at me with a concerned expression and quietly asked if I was really going to go through with making Sarah pay for everything. I told her that I wasn't looking for a payout beyond what was fair. I just wanted the cost of the damages covered. I added that I was mostly thinking about how awkward things were about to get for them. I noted that Sarah was going to apologize to the wrong person, which was bound to create a scene. By the time Lily and I made it to the sidewalk, Tyler Miller was already waiting. The most noticeable thing about him was a bright red handprint across his cheek. He was standing there by the curb, wiping away tears and sobbing like a child. It wasn't hard to guess what happened. He had likely confessed to his father and received a very physical lesson in responsibility. Sarah and Chloe stood there in total shock at the sight of their supposedly rich hero crying in public. Chloe looked confused and asked why a rich guy would be crying so hard over a car he could supposedly afford. Sarah whispered that he probably just loved the car a lot, noting how possessive he was of it every time they went out together. Chloe sighed and made some comment about how cars are like second wives to men. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at that. I told myself that I certainly didn't treat my car like a spouse, and Tyler was only nervous because he knew the owner of that car was standing right here. Sarah didn't hear me as she rushed over to Tyler with a pitiful look, trying to offer an explanation. Tyler finally reached his breaking point and screamed at her to shut up. He lunged forward and grabbed a handful of her hair, his eyes filled with pure rage. He swung his hand and delivered a brutal slap across Sarah's face that echoed through the parking lot. Neither Sarah nor Chloe had expected the school's golden boy to resort to physical violence in broad daylight. Chloe tried to pull him away, but Sarah was already sobbing, telling him that she deserved the hit because she was the one at fault. She begged for his forgiveness and promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to him. She was still trying to maintain the fantasy of their future together. Tyler screamed that he didn't want anything from her as he started throwing punches at her face. After a few hits, even Sarah and Chloe realized that this wasn't just a lover's quarrel. He was truly trying to hurt her. This wasn't just him letting off steam, it was a brutal assault. The students who had gathered to watch were horrified as they saw the girl who had been playing princess in a supercar just minutes ago being beaten on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the supposed rich gentleman was dragging her by her hair and punching her repeatedly. Chloe was screaming for him to stop, reminding him that Sarah was a girl and he was being far too violent. Tyler was too far gone to listen to reason and landed a heavy blow that resulted in a sickening crack. Sarah's front tooth was knocked clean out her mouth. She clutched her bleeding gums in disbelief before dropping to her knees to search for the tooth on the pavement. She was sobbing and begging him to stop while she crawled around looking for her tooth. She told Chloe to run and get some milk to preserve it. I actually nodded at that, mentioning that it was a smart move because milk can keep a knocked-out tooth viable for reattachment. Lily looked at me with a shocked expression, asking if I was actually enjoying the carnage. I told her I wasn't that cold-hearted. Since we had been together for a year, seeing her in that state wasn't exactly pleasant. However, I didn't feel the need to intervene either. Lily pointed out that I was still wearing a grin, so I just shrugged and told her I was naturally a cheerful person. I made a joke about how people who smile more tend to have better luck. Meanwhile, a battered and broken Sarah finally looked in my direction as if she had just remembered I existed. Sarah held her bleeding mouth and screamed at me, questioning my manhood because I was just standing there watching her get hit. I gave her a serious look and reminded her of her own words. I told her that since she had threatened to sue me for harassment if I ever came near her again, I was just respecting her wishes by staying away. Tyler Miller finally noticed me standing there and let go of Sarah's hair, turning his attention my way. Chloe immediately tried to step between us, telling Tyler that she understood how much pain and stress he was under. She claimed that Sarah had suffered so much just to be with him and that I had been bullying her the whole morning. Chloe tried to paint Sarah as a tragic figure who was only suffering because of her deep love for Tyler. Tyler let out a deafening roar and told Chloe to shut up, calling her and her entire family a bunch of broke peasants. Chloe was instantly silenced, her arrogant facade crumbling the second her supposed hero turned on her. She looked like a kicked puppy, too afraid to even breathe loudly. Tyler walked right up to me, and for a second, I thought he was going to offer a verbal apology. However, the action he took next was something absolutely no one in that parking lot expected to see. In front of dozens of watching students, the campus golden boy dropped to his knees on the concrete and started sobbing. He begged for my forgiveness, calling me brother and pleading for mercy. A heavy silence fell over the crowd as every pair of eyes shifted toward me. The onlookers were absolutely speechless, their jaws dropped in disbelief. Chloe was visibly trembling, unable to process the sight of her idol kneeling before a broke guy. Lily just kept her head down, staying out of the spectacle. Sarah was still clutching her mouth, but now her nose was bleeding heavily as well. She tried to sniff the blood back in, but ended up choking and coughing violently. Not a single person had predicted the story would take such a dramatic turn. To be honest, even I was surprised that things had escalated this far. I looked down at the kneeling Tyler and sighed, asking him why he had ever bothered to pull such a stupid stunt in the first place. Chloe looked at Tyler with total confusion, asking him why on earth he was apologizing to someone like me. I looked at the crowd and told Tyler that if he was going to apologize, he should explain the real reason to everyone right now. Tyler sobbed as he confessed to the crowd that he had stolen my car to act like a big shot and had tried to steal my girlfriend. He called himself a piece of trash and begged me not to lower myself to his level by staying angry. He cried that his father told him they were already behind on rent and had no way to pay for the massive repair bill. I nodded and acknowledged that his father was a hard worker, which was exactly why I had trusted their shop with my car in the first place. I remarked on the tragedy of such a diligent man having such a foolish and entitled son. Tyler's sobbing intensified as he promised never to do anything like it again. He begged for more time to pay back the debt, saying he would do anything I asked. Sarah stood there looking like a statue, mumbling the words repair shop and stolen car over and over again. I told her that the truth was right in front of her face, and she could no longer deny it. She pointed a shaking finger at the Lamborghini and asked if it really belonged to me. I gave her a simple nod and confirmed that it was my car. She looked like she had been hit by a bolt of lightning, her lips quivering as the reality of her loss set in. She wailed and asked how it was possible that I was the wealthy one. She was obsessed with the idea that I was just a broke guy handing out flyers. I corrected her, explaining that while I was handing out flyers, they were for businesses that I actually owned. Sarah ignored her injuries and stumbled toward me, grabbing my arm with a desperate grip. She tried to call me her babe and start some long explanation, but I pulled my arm away. I reminded her that I was no longer her boyfriend and that we were officially finished. I placed my hand on Tyler's shoulder while he sat there looking up at me like a stray dog. I told him that while he was the one at fault, I actually felt a strange sense of gratitude toward him for what had happened. I explained that without his stupid actions, I might never have seen Sarah's true colors. He had inadvertently done me a massive favor by exposing her, so I decided I was going to return the gesture in some way. I told him that since he was graduating soon, he should negotiate the final total with the dealership. I promised him that once he had a steady job, I would allow him to pay off the debt over a 3-year installment plan. Tyler looked up with a look of pure relief and asked if I was serious. I told him I was, but emphasized that he had to be the one to pay, not his father. I also reminded him that the medical bills for Sarah's missing tooth were going to be another significant expense he had to deal with. Tyler immediately declared that he wouldn't give her a single penny for her medical bills. He said he would rather go to jail and have a criminal record than help her, especially since his career prospects were already ruined. I asked him if he was truly willing to go to prison just to spite her. He gritted his teeth and said she didn't deserve a dime of his money. I patted him on the shoulder and let out a laugh, telling him that I respected his clarity on that issue. I told him his attitude was refreshing and decided to knock another $1,000 off his debt to me. Sarah was completely hysterical by this point, begging for another chance and claiming she had made a terrible mistake. She stopped mid-sentence and spun around to point a finger at Chloe, screaming that everything was her fault. She accused Chloe of being the one who had poisoned her mind and encouraged her to cheat. She claimed she had always loved me and only listened to Chloe's toxic advice because she was weak. Chloe stood there with a blank expression, unable to find a single word to defend herself. Sarah kept screaming that Chloe had ruined her life. I was getting bored with their squabbling and told Sarah she should probably head to the pharmacy for some Plan B before she actually ended up pregnant. I told her it was the last bit of advice I would ever give her, I made it clear that I wasn't being kind, but I knew her well enough to know she would just get an abortion if she actually conceived. I told her I didn't want an innocent life to be snuffed out just because she was such a terrible person. The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Sarah's face went ghostly white at my comment. Chloe suddenly started crying as well, realizing that her financial neck was on the line. She asked Sarah if she was still planning to pay back the money they had borrowed from the loan shark and the other students. Sarah immediately turned on her friend and screamed that since it was Chloe's fault, Chloe should be the one to deal with the debt. Chloe broke down into a full panic, wailing that the people she borrowed from would literally kill her if she didn't come up with the money. I casually mentioned that if she was so afraid of the loan sharks, she should just find a way to pay them back. Chloe's sobbing intensified as she wailed about where a student like her was supposed to find $10,000 on such short notice. Lily was shaking with righteous anger as she confronted Chloe. She pointed out the irony of Chloe mocking her for being frugal when Chloe's own family was just as broke. She told Chloe that she was a class traitor who stepped on the poor despite being one of them, and that this was finally her karma. Chloe collapsed onto the sidewalk in a heap of tears and despair. I gave Sarah a polite smile and told her goodbye, warning her to never contact me again unless it was about the debt. I made it clear that any other communication would be reported as harassment to the police. I turned to Lily and suggested we go grab a nice lunch to celebrate the fact that justice had been served. I offered to give her a ride in the Lamborghini. Lily just rolled her eyes and asked me if I'd started drinking early in the morning. She bluntly asked why she would ever want to get into my car or spend time with me. I was a bit taken aback by her honesty, but I realized she had a point given everything that had happened. I just scratched my nose awkwardly and drove off in my car without another word. Eventually, the two families reached a settlement where they split the cost of the car repairs. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Sarah's parents were so enraged they actually broke her leg during a confrontation. It wasn't just an exaggeration. She actually had to have a heavy cast put on. To make matters worse, the bone didn't set properly, and she was left with a permanent, painful limp. The doctors told her they would have to re-break the leg to fix it correctly. The shame of the whole situation was too much for her, and she dropped out of the University of Wisconsin before her senior year. Chloe had the nerve to return to campus, but she was a social pariah from then on. Every time she walked into a room, people would point and whisper about her being a traitor to her own class. Her reputation was permanently destroyed. Chloe was desperate to pay back the loan shark and try to find work all over Madison. Unfortunately for her, the story of her toxicity had spread so far that no business owner would hire her. She eventually reached a point of total desperation and came to me begging for any kind of work I could offer. I happened to own a few small diners in the area, so I gave her a job as a janitor. I assigned her to the worst task possible, which was scrubbing the bathrooms. It was a poetic kind of justice to see her cleaning toilets for the very people she used to look down on. She would cry the entire time she was working, and it didn't take long for the rest of the student body to find out where she was. Some of the students she had been mean to would purposefully go to the diner and mess up the bathrooms just to force her to clean them over and over again. Even after dropping out, Sarah wouldn't stop messaging me and begging for another chance. I blocked her repeatedly, but she would just get a burner phone and keep harassing me. I finally decided to follow through on her own advice and filed a formal harassment lawsuit against her. The legal papers finally scared her enough to leave me alone for good. As for Lily and me, nothing romantic ever developed. She was a disciplined and independent person who wanted to make it on her own merit, which was a world away from Sarah's lifestyle. During our final year of college, she rarely reached out to me. After graduation, she moved back to her small town in rural Wisconsin to become a teacher. She told me there were a lot of kids there from struggling families, and she wanted to give back to her community. I had an immense amount of respect for her choice to live a simple but meaningful life. I tried to stay in touch, but it was clear she wasn't looking for a relationship with someone from my background. The only favor she ever asked of me was to help organize a clothing drive for the underprivileged children at her school. We eventually drifted apart, but I still think of her often. I always remember her words about having dignity regardless of your bank account. I truly hope that whatever path she chooses in life, she finds the happiness and success she deserves. In the end, the people who lived for cruelty and greed had to face the wreckage of their own lives, while the girl who stayed true to herself chose a modest but fulfilling life. I hope we can all witness the complexity of human nature and still choose to believe in basic goodness. Even after facing the strongest of material temptations, I hope we can still hear the quiet call of dignity and independence deep within our souls.